Hello, I'm State Representative Terry Johnson from the 89th House District. Welcome to Ohio in Focus.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. I'm your host, Mike Ditto. We have with us in the studio today State Representative Terry Johnson, who serves the 89th House District, which includes Scioto County and parts of Lawrence and Adams counties. Representative, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mike.
So we're very, very glad to have you here. This is your first term in the Ohio House, and you have a background that is unlike many of your colleagues. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a father of four. I have four boys ranging from 32 down to 16, one of whom just graduated from high school this weekend.
Congratulations to him.
Well, thank you. We had a graduation party and, of course, the graduation ceremony itself. And, another little guy is up and out, but doing the typical family dad stuff this weekend. And my wife is a pharmacist from Southern Ohio. We come from a medical background. She's a pharmacist, I'm a doc. I've been a physician for about 20 years now, and also in the National Guard. So it's a little bit different, slightly different approach to being a state representative.
So you've been here for just a few months now. What have your experiences been like?
Well, it seems like 10 years because we've done so many things.
Sure.
Yeah, but on the other hand, my vast legislative experience at this point is a little over 4 months. So I'm trying to get my mind around that. But it's been a great experience, actually. I love the collegiality of the other representatives on both sides of the aisle. I've gone out of my way to establish relationships and found everyone pretty receptive to that.
Now, you are a member of the House that has a military background. Tell us a little bit about your service, if you would.
Well, I got involved with the Ohio National Guard as a medical student. I was a third-year medical student and found out that there was a pathway to get into the military. And I had always been interested in the military, but it always went some other direction. Every time I thought I could maybe approach the military, get into it some way, it sort of went away. That was not meant to be. Until I was a medical student, and one day we were doing a rotation up in Sandusky, Ohio, a couple of my friends and I, and that weekend, I was kind of stuck, had nothing to do, and saw my buddy put on a set of BDUs. And I said, well, what are you doing? He said, I'm in the National Guard. I had no idea because we were so focused on studying and learning, needless to say, after that weekend, I found out how he did that, learned about the pathway to get in. As a fourth-year medical student, I joined. So that was during the Gulf War. As a young medical student, I actually spent a little bit of time out in San Francisco at the Presidio at Letterman Army Medical Center. Mm-hmm. During the Gulf War, and got my feet wet with that. And then came back to Ohio as a National Guardsman and was involved at the Lucasville prison riot, the floods back in 96, 97, and then had a couple of humanitarian missions to Panama and Ecuador, and also deployed 3 times in the global war on terror. Was in Iraq twice and northern Kuwait once.
And we've seen some of the letters that you wrote back home when you were serving over in Iraq. Tell us a little bit about those, if you would.
Well, that's interesting. I always like to share. I feel very, very fortunate with my life, and not a lot of people get to do what I've done. And so, when I had to deploy to the war zone, after catching my breath and understanding I was going to Baghdad, it was actually me. The next thing I thought really was, gosh, I bet a lot of people would like to go with me or see things through my eyes. And, that's the veterans back home, elderly folks that remember World War II and the Korean War, and also people who were just curious about what their loved ones were going through over there. And so I shared my perspective. I had no idea whether anyone would even read the first letter that I sent, but it turns out it was wildly popular and to my amazement. So I kept writing them. I wrote about 10 letters the first deployment, repeated it on my second deployment, and on my third deployment did the same thing, and they ran in the local papers.
So you have a military background, you served our country, and thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
You're a doctor, you're also a teacher. In that time, you found more time to run for the Ohio House. What inspired you to run for state representative?
Well, when I was on my last deployment in Iraq, I was watching Armed Forces TV, watching the news. I was upset generally about the direction my country was going in. I felt that I needed to come home and do something differently. But it's not just the country, it's the place I'm from. Everyone has a tendency to armchair quarterback, to say, someone should do this and someone should do that. I hate armchair quarterbacks. No offense to the armchair quarterback demographic. I hope you'll still vote for me. But just, I'm putting you on notice that it's not a good thing. I like people who act. I like people who stand up and do things. And so consequently, looking at the economic, I call it recession. People say, oh, it's not well, we're in a chronic economic recession in Scioto County, in southern Ohio generally, except for Lawrence County, which is actually doing fairly well. But generally, those river counties have not done well over the last 2 or 3 decades. So that problem was going on. The prescription drug problem and crime in the last decade has absolutely exploded in southern Ohio. And growing up there and loving the people and loving the area, I really felt that something had to be done. Someone had to take a different path. And again, not wanting to be an armchair quarterback, I looked myself in the mirror and said, I need to do something. I need to be involved with this. I need to turn things around or do my part to turn things around.
Now, as a former county elected official, as the county coroner, you saw the prescription drug problem up front, very personal. When you got here, you introduced House Bill 93, which has since been signed into law by the governor. Yeah. Tell your folks back home about the bill and how this came about.
Well, the original thoughts that I had on this were as a prescribing doc in southern Ohio, as an emergency room doc, as an urgent care doctor, and as a doctor who ran a family practice residency. And I really felt, 10 years ago when I was the president of our local medical society, I really felt that if I only showed the public and I only showed law enforcement, if I only showed the docs, what was going on, that they'd solve the problem. And sure enough, we had great docs working, we had great law enforcement folks working, we had people in the clergy working, but they were all working separately. They were in their own silos, they had their own program. And, one of the things you learn in the military is, no matter how good your soldier, no matter how good your person, if that person or that soldier's isolated and working alone, very few things can be accomplished. When you bring people together in a common purpose, that's when you get things done. So when we brought people together and exposed them to the problem that year, I had high hopes. But within a year, things went back to normal. Things only got worse. Then as the county coroner, I actually had to account for these deaths. I had to determine the cause and manner of death. I did complete autopsies and toxicologies. And I found out for sure, it wasn't suppositional anymore, I found out for sure what was killing the folks in southern Ohio. And then anecdotally, talking to the ER docs, talking to the people in the ICU, all the near overdoses, and then having a close relationship as the county coroner with local law enforcement, I was able to determine that 80 to 90% of our crime was being caused by things related to these prescription drugs.
That's a pretty staggering statistic.
It's just amazing. And southern Ohio is full, absolutely full of good people. And this dark shadow is like a cancer that has been eating away at the good people and the good culture that we have. And so I took it upon my shoulders to do something about it. I kept those statistics. I did everything I could to bring it to the attention of media. They were slow to respond. But eventually the Ohio Department of Health recognized what the statistics meant and were able to use those numbers to determine that we were the epicenter of a growing problem.
You introduced this bill jointly with Representative Dave Burke, who is a pharmacist.
Yeah.
So was that an easy relationship to get this bill through?
Oh, it's wonderful. You know, Danny Bupp is another representative just to the west of me, and Danny was very engaged with this, and he's a senior legislator. He's in his last term in the House of Representatives, and so Danny was working with me when I was a candidate. And Danny could have easily co-authored this bill, but he stepped aside and let me work with Dave because it's a natural union between a practicing pharmacist and a practicing doctor. Dave and I understand what the problem is. We also understand that we don't want to impede the practice of pharmacy or the practice of medicine because 99.9% of those professionals are wonderful people doing a great job, doing good things for Ohio every day. The citizens of Ohio can be proud of their professionals here in the state of Ohio. So having the two of us work on the bill was a really smart thing, and I applaud Danny for letting me take that position.
Some of the folks that came to testify on behalf of the bill are from your district, the group Solace. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about them.
Yeah, SOLACE is an acronym for Surviving Our Loss and Continuing Every Day. And I have a particular affinity for these moms and some dads that are in this group because those statistics that I was keeping, those numbers actually were their kids. So as those numbers mounted, you know, I never lost track of the fact of who they actually were. These were people. And so this group formed to support each other and help each other through this awful process. I think probably originally it was more of a grieving process, but it translated into a movement to bring attention and draw resources to this terrible problem. And so when those ladies stand behind me or with me wherever I am talking about this problem, mm-hmm. I understand exactly who they are, and I've seen what they've lost. And so it really, cuts to the bottom of my soul. And for me, it's not just another group, it's not just another cause. This is something that I am deeply engaged in and will not stop until we make a huge improvement in this problem.
And it sounds like House Bill 93 will do just that. It's, as you've mentioned before, a starting point in a long process. Many of the members of the House on both sides of the aisle talked about jobs mm-hmm. and the economy in the last election cycle, and you
Absolutely.
focused largely on the prescription drug abuse issue as well. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about how your district compares with others on the job front as well.
Well, interestingly, I think a little bit differently than most folks, and I'm surprised by this. I guess it's a good thing, but I'm an osteopathic physician, and the thing that osteopathic physicians do, perhaps better than anyone else, is think holistically. When we approach a patient, we approach them not just because of the particular disease or malady that they have. We approach them as a whole person, and anything we do affects something else. So, if someone has an earache, I don't just give them an antibiotic and send them out the door. I've got a lot of questions I want to ask them. I want to do a lot of different things with that person. That method of thought I use in other things. And so when I look at the problems we have in Southern Ohio, I don't just see the lack of jobs. That's not the only problem. The problem is manyfold. One is the prescription drug problem and the crime. These two things have Southern Ohio in a vicious downward spiral, and something has to be done to break that downward spiral. The lack of jobs feeds into it, but it's not the only part of it. So if we suddenly had a Toyota plant, we wouldn't have enough people. We'd have people coming from other places to work at the Toyota plant because our folks can't all pass drug tests and they're not trained. So we need to look at this problem holistically. We need to knock out the prescription drug problem. We need to decrease the crime. We need to work together. And interestingly, folks coming together to work on this drug problem, they've worked together haven't worked together for decades in Southern Ohio. I see this as an opportunity to attack other problems like the job problem, like the litter problem, the self-esteem that our kids have coming through school. I see it as an opportunity to keep more of our kids there in Southern Ohio. If they go off to school, I'd like to see them come back to Southern Ohio instead of populating all other places. We keep sending our best and brightest away, and I don't want to see that.
In addition to the items that you've mentioned, House Bill 93, bringing jobs back to the area, and the joint effort between getting rid of the prescription drug problem and creating jobs in your area. Another bill that you and Representative Bupp have worked on is House Bill 45.
Absolutely.
That's a bill that actually received bipartisan support in the Ohio House and received the support of some Democrats and majority Republicans.
Yes.
Tell us about that bill.
Well, House Bill 45 is so appropriately named. The Colt 45 is one of the most well-known firearms in American history. It certainly served our troops well in World War I and World War II. Korea and Vietnam is the weapon that I personally trained on when I first went to be a National Guardsman. So to have this bill named House Bill 45 it's just an amazing thing. And any chance I have to help Americans restore our Second Amendment rights, I'm going to be there fighting for that. Of all the amendments, in the Constitution, and of the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, there's only one that goes to the point of saying, "and it shall not be infringed." Okay, it was so important to the framers that they said, "It shall not be infringed." And what we've seen since the time the Constitution was published, infringement on a massive scale. Everyone infringes on this particular amendment. And it's gotten to the point where it's almost like it's not a right. It's not part of being an American. It's not in the Constitution. And that's wrong. The wisdom that the founders had with the Second Amendment is astounding. Free people should be able to defend themselves, their property, and their families. And I'm all for that. House Bill 45 simplifies concealed carry, and that's the primary thing that it does. It makes it so law-abiding citizens that hold a concealed carry license are confident that they're abiding by the law. And that's key. These people are law-abiding citizens. They want to obey the law, and the law the way it was pretty confusing. No one wants that. It's also a restaurant carry bill. Detractors say guns and bars. Well, it's a great argument, and you can immediately diminish all these other good things by just saying guns and bars. Well, the fact is there are already guns in bars, and they're taken in by criminals. People who aren't supposed to have guns in there. If you are a non-drinker and you want to go into a restaurant or someplace that has a Class D liquor permit, now you can. But if you drink and try to exercise your concealed carry right, you're wrong. Zero tolerance. You cannot do that. Law-abiding citizens should respect that, and I'm confident that they will.
When legislators come to Columbus, one of the first things that they do or get to do, I guess, is start the committee process. And the Speaker assigns members to House committees. Yeah. If you would tell your constituents back home what committees you serve on.
I'm honored to serve on the Health and Aging Committee, and of course the House Bill 93 moved through that. And many other important things to the citizens of Ohio. Also on the Transportation Committee, and that's vital to the economic development of the state as a whole, but also to Southern Ohio in particular, and happy to serve there. Also on the Veterans Affairs Committees, Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs. I'm the vice chair of that committee, and that's quite an honor for a freshman to be offered that.
Do you enjoy your work here in the House, Dr. Johnson?
I really do, I see it primarily as a duty, like being in the Guard, and obviously, I hope people will emulate my example. There are so many good people in our communities, and I really feel that local government needs to be better represented. And I don't say that to disparage people who are already serving, but on the other hand, good people sit back and watch things happen. If you're a successful business person, you can run a business in this tight economy, you're a charismatic person, you can get people to move in the right direction, you should be involved. I think from dog catcher to president, we need better people standing up and taking the hit and representing folks. Our framers, when they originally wrote the Constitution, formed the country, did all the things they did, The check and balance system that we all learn about in American history and in civics with legislative, judicial, and executive, we all know about those, and they were enumerated and written down, and essays were written about them. You can go online and find out all sorts of things. Well, there's another check and balance that really wasn't enumerated because it was so obvious. Our framers assumed that the very best people would always be involved in local government. And that way, the federal government could never get out of check. Imagine if you had some congressman trying to pull something over on a John Adams as he sat in a local government position. Wouldn't happen.
Right.
You know, so we need our best and brightest to step up and serve. The pay is not competitive with a business person's salary. If a person's a CEO of a company, taking a government job like this is probably not very appealing. But I would put it to you that it's not about the money. It's about serving the people. It's about making our communities better. It's about bringing folks together. If you have leadership abilities, we need you. And we need everybody to step up and do a good job at a local level.
And that's a very good message to end on. Dr. Johnson, it has been a pleasure having you on the program today.
Sir.
Appreciate it very much. And thank you for sharing your story with us. You've got a great background, and we appreciate you being here. We look forward to seeing all of you again on the next edition of Ohio in Focus, the program that brings state government to you. Thanks for joining us.